real thing is sometimes we need to be able to look at what is it costing us as a nation. And I think we'll put some research together. I read somewhere where they said it was costing Nigeria about 550 billion US dollars. 550 billion US dollars from 1960 till date. PwC did a research and said that corruption is almost, with our population of about 200 million, corruption is about $1,500 per head Nigerians. So corruption, it's a big topical issue. The real question is, how do we deal with it? What do we take first? What is it that we are going to do with corruption? There's economic corruption. It causes, foreign investors are leaving the country. They may not be able to tell you all the reasons why they are leaving. Foreign investors are also afraid to come into the country. There are things that are just not working. Abandoned projects all over the place, inflated projects, over invoicing. The government itself admitted that much, that the reason why they removed subsidy was because it was spiced and laced with corruption and they couldn't deal with it. Dealing with corruption. So corruption is a hydra, is a monster that is still swallowing Nigeria. That we are still surviving is just a miracle of God. So what is the real cost to the Nigerian people? What is the cost? What is it costing our economy to keep servicing this corruption? We are told, recently another revelation came out about 700 and something billion. Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, I think a judge gave an order that the minister should account for how she spent that money under the Buhari regime. So corruption just has its different dimensions in Nigeria, and we have to look at it. Is Faye on the platform? There are a few highlights we wanted to look at.
I'm trying to reach. Yeah, he should be joining.
I'm loading the presentation now.
And I know that everybody on the platform, everybody has one thing or the other, you've encountered one area. A research was done, and about, I think 68% of Nigerians said they have had to give bribe in one way or the other to public officials to get something. 68, that means almost 7 in 10 Nigerians have had to give a bribe to get something done for them officially. Something that ordinarily you should get done normally, but you have had to, you are petted down to get something from you. So it's a very high cost we are paying for this corruption in Nigeria. And what we really want to try and do today is look at, we know it's deep, we know it's endemic, but really, how can we begin to get out of it? What can the government possibly do? Is there a willingness to fight this corruption? We hear that corruption has been institutionalized. People build corruption into the budget, i.e., even the budget that is being passed right from the highest zone, there's corruption in it. So what can we as citizens do to make sure that we handle this thing? Thank you very much. Jumoke, is the speaker on the platform now? Has he been able to join?
No, please go ahead with the presentation. Please go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. So the cost of corruption in Nigeria. Faye, move on, setting the context, go ahead. So I've tried to speak to some of this slide here. And this is a historical view looking at from 1960. This table shows that corruption has been there. and that the illicit flow of funds out of the country has deprived the nation of the much needed resources we need for our development. The bad thing about this corruption is that when they take this money, they take it out of the country. In fact, even those that are in the country now is saved in hard currency. Any wonder why, our Naira keeps falling? Because nobody keeps, especially all the corrupt monies. And I had a suggestion that day that the former Speaker of the House was saying that if we can get all the dollars stashed away in all the soccerways and in overhead tanks out, that our Naira will be strengthened. So it's something that is really impacting healthcare, infrastructural development, education, roads, and all of that. Yeah, go ahead to the next slide. This is just a little presentation. Between 1960 and 1970, we said during this period, Nigeria's revenue was primarily driven by agriculture and non-oil services. But the discovery of oil came with its own challenge. And between 1970 and 1999, we saw a surge. The oil price hike of the 70s significantly boosted the Nigerian economy. That this reliance on oil took us away from agriculture. But between 1990 and now, it has been another ball game. So this timeline shows the evolution of Nigeria, So losses due to corruption, Nigeria, other countries, that estimated annual losses to corruption in Nigeria range from 5 to 15% of our GDP. This translates to billions of dollars lost each year. I saw the cumulative figure, which was what I spoke about earlier on, $550 billion. 550 billion. I want you to put that in context. Our annual budget per year is probably not more than 5 billion. This table highlights, the ministries where the research found that corruption was the most. Ministry of Petroleum, estimated losses, 5 billion. Finance, 3 billion. NNPC, 2 billion. Ministry of Power, 1 billion. Works, 800 million. Education, 600. Health, 500. Customs, 400. Immigration, 300. Police, 200. This is official corruption at the top. This one does not include what you are being asked to pay in bribes and kickback. Most corrupt regimes since independence, as this research showed. First military republic. While corruption was present during this period, it was not as widespread as it became subsequent regime. However, the foundation of systemic corruption was laid during that era. All right? Fourth republic to present date. Despite democratic reform, corruption continues to be a major challenge. While efforts, to have made to combat corruption remain deeply entrenched in the system, requiring sustained and comprehensive solution. The flow chart illustrates that this is actually, we are not making progress. Because I remember when Buhari and Idiagbon first came in 1982 or 83, we thought that we have seen the height of corruption at that time when they were jailing people. And Bruce Ali went to jail for stealing 5 million, eventually died when he came out. If those people that went to jail for 100 years were to see what Buhari and his gang did to the nation, I think they should be going to jail for 1 million years. When they are sentencing people to 99 years in prison for all those corruptions. Now, I'm not saying that what they did then was good either, but, just we have progressed. Infrastructural deficiency. These are all the effects of corruption. Roads, school, hospital, power. None gets worked on. Go ahead, Faye, move to the next slide.
Sonia, I think
I
think our guest is in now.
Huh?
Our guest is in now, sir.
Our guest is here now. Okay, fine. How many more slides? Let's just finish this. So There are a lot we can say. Ajaokuta Steel Rolling Mill is another bedsmear of corruption. I have never seen anything like this Ajaokuta Steel Mill. This was supposed to, catapult our industrial revolution. Any country that can produce its own steel, the development that happens in that country is phenomenal. This project had a lot of prospect and promise. Almost 30, 40 years after, we are yet to get a single rod. Not only Ajaokuta, I remember then, these projects were conceived during the Yar'Adua Obasanjo era, when General Den Yar'Adua said they will not sign this thing until they put one. So we had one in Katsina Steel Rolling Mill as well. Nobody is even talking about that one. Just a pool, and up to today, we are not being able to deal with it. We have 3 refineries that are not working and have not worked in the last almost 25 years. Everybody was shouting about Dangote refinery. And I was listening to somebody yesterday, he's a petroleum expert, making analysis, because Dangote is beginning to shout now. He doesn't have crude to run his refinery. He's built a 650 metric ton capacity refinery, no crude to give him. And the government is saying that Dangote should have, prepared on how he was going to get crude. Is the government not a stakeholder in Dangote refinery? Did they not know when it will start functioning? Couldn't they make provision for it? And they say they are trying to fix our refineries. If you cannot give Dangote crude now, if you fix Warri, Port Harcourt, and Kaduna refinery, where is the crude going to come from to feed those refineries? Or we're going to start importing crude again. So there's just so much mess going on. But, that's why we are here. We want to see how we can profile some solutions to this. How endemic is this corruption? What's happening? A list of abandoned projects, like you can see on the screen there. I don't want to run through them. National Stadium is a big one. Second Niger Bridge, although that has been completed partially. Abuja Light Rail, internal, not the Abuja Kaduna Rail now. There's a light rail within Abuja that was supposed to have been done. Abandoned. National Theatre, a lot of money spent in it. So really, how do we progress? Everywhere you look, there's corruption. We have a guest today who has done some work in this area, and he will be speaking to us. So I'll hand over to Pastor. Pastor, are you there? Is the guest there?
Yes, they are both here. Mr. Deji is
All right.
here.
So, Mr. Deji, you are welcome. Pastor, I hand over to you.
Hello, can you hear
Hello.
me?
Okay. Deji, you are welcome,
Yes.
sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. You are finding it difficult to join initially when Pastor was introducing you. Were
Yes,
you
yes.
on the
I'm
platform
terribly
yet?
sorry. Things just weren't working as smoothly as I expected it to work, but I'm delighted I'm able to join now.
Okay. All right. You are welcome to this conversation, the cost of corruption in Nigeria. We are delighted that you are able to make it, and we'll be able to speak to some of the issues that we're looking at.
AG, I've just told them a bit of lies about you or some tales here and there of our days in Ibadan and so on and so forth. But I know the Lord has forgiven you, and you are now a nice man. But God bless you. Great to see you, and the Lord be with you. I didn't tell them that I knew you when they invited you, but I said, well, we will see him when he comes. But Ibadan was lovely in those days.
Yes, it was. Well,
it was a beautiful place. All right.
I'm very happy for this opportunity. And as Pastor Ito said, I have known him for, without trying to date myself, must be about 50 years now. So it's been a long time.
Okay. So thank you very much. for coming on the platform. So today we are looking at the cost of corruption. What is the cost of corruption to our economy, to our people? First of all, let's start by, would you want to lay the foundation? How does corruption occur?
Well, let me start by saying that I'm very thankful. I appreciate the opportunity to talk on this subject. It is a subject that has interested me for many years. And
your voice is a bit low, sir.
I wonder why that is. Can you hear me now?
We can, I guess. Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, all right. I'll try to speak as loud as I can, and just let me know if I'm not coming through.
Would you be able to turn on your video as well, sir?
I am not, unfortunately.
Okay.
I have a problem with my camera, so I'm only going to be heard, not seen.
We'll put up your picture.
Right, that's lovely. I hope that doesn't scare people away.
It's a lovely picture, sir.
Thank you. Well, as I was saying, this subject is one that always makes me very angry, really, truly angry. Fortunately, long ago, I learned that anger is an emotion that doesn't solve difficult problems as such. One must instead commit to a deliberate, practical, logical, and sustainable solution. The first Vice President has set in motion, he has painted a graphic picture for anyone interested in knowing how deeply troubling our situation is in Nigeria. Anyone who has only the faintest idea of the cost and consequences of corruption in our society, and in all societies, to be candid, cannot help being very angry. I'd like to first start to give some definition to corruption. What do we mean by corruption? And I'll try to describe how it manifests, especially here in Nigeria. I want to explain what the cost. I will not spend a lot of time on the costs and consequences because that has already been laid bare, but I would like to spend some time, a little bit of time, on what we can do to fight until it no longer constitutes the existential threat that it currently is. I work for an organization called Good Governance Africa. I'm the chairperson of the South Africa regional office. GGA has offices in Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, Mauritius, and South Africa. We publish a quarterly publication called Africa in Fact. And the second quarter edition of the 2024 second quarter edition of Africa in Fact is focused entirely on the scourge of corruption, which AIF, Africa in Fact, refers to as Africa's cancer. To call corruption a cancer or a scourge is not at all an overstatement. It's not an exaggeration at all. It has such a ravaging and deleterious effect on societies. It kills, it destroys, it decimates. One must therefore confront it as one would such an existential threat. Although my focus will be on grand corruption, I will still like to say a few words about corruption in general. Of course, I've chosen to focus on grand corruption because of its scale and the enormity of its consequences on our society. Let's be clear from the outset. Corruption is not a Nigerian ailment. It is, in fact, not an African disease. it is a global scourge. It affects virtually every country in the world, although to different degrees. It involves citizens of wealthy and poor countries alike. However, for a country like Nigeria and most other countries in Africa, which have relatively lower GDP, corruption is an existential threat. It cripples the economies. It results in large-scale youth unemployment. It collapses the healthcare systems. It makes poverty a rampant burden on our society, and it undermines the rule of law, which is the very foundation of a stable and secure society. Therefore, the cost of corruption, the consequences of corruption, is exceedingly high. It is one that cannot be left unaddressed. 21 years ago, on July 11, 2003, that is today, 21 years ago, the African Union adopted the Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, AUCPCC. Since then, corruption in Africa has not diminished, it has worsened. On the other hand, in the same period, most of the economies of African states have taken a turn for the worse. This is not an accident. There is a cause and effect relationship between corruption and a thriving economy. Data from Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index last year shows that 90%, or approximately, let's say 49 out of the 54 African countries, scored less than 50% on the index. For sub-Saharan Africa, the region to which Nigeria belongs, the average score was about 32%. One thing that we must be clear about is that corruption involves both private and public individuals. It involves companies as well as the civil service. It almost always requires that people misuse their positions and power for private and personal gain. This is almost always at the expense of their duties or public interest. Grand corruption, which accounts for the most costs to African countries and to Nigeria in particular, involves public individuals using their position and influence to loot public funds for their private benefit. Examples of corrupt acts include bribery, embezzlement, nepotism, and money laundering. These issues are particularly destructive in a nation like ours, with weak institutions and regulatory mechanisms. Crucial and scarce resources are diverted from essential public services required for the sustainable development and benefit of a majority of citizens to a few individuals. In Nigeria, it is estimated that 4% of total government revenue, or about $2.2 billion, is lost annually to leakages. It might be more than that. In Kenya, Malawi, Tanzania, and others, the story is not too different. These are not small numbers that we are talking about in a continent ravaged by rampant youth unemployment, poverty, lack of infrastructure, and so on. These leakages indicate the corrosive and detrimental impact of corruption on economic growth and development, and how corruption can perpetuate poverty in society. The latest survey of more than 39 countries by Africa's leading socioeconomic research group, Afrobarometer, indicates that citizens are concerned that corruption is on the rise. State capture is relatively new to the lexicon of corruption, but it refers to the unethical entanglement of business people with state officials in a conspiracy to subvert public institutions and turn them into a mechanism for furthering private interests. This is like a wholesale takeover of government by private interests to benefit a few, while the larger population languishes in poverty. The results is a systematic undermining of state apparatus so that policy and reforms that can benefit the population and improve governance are effectively undermined by collusion by powerful firms and state officials. In the survey that I referred to, Gabon, South Africa, Nigeria, Liberia, and Uganda stand out as having some of the highest perceived levels of official corruption. A significant proportion of the citizens in these countries reported paying bribes to police. This is a very serious situation. When a crucial arm of the rule of law, the mechanism for the rule of law of a state, is rated as having among the most deleterious impact on the validity and sustenance of the rule of law, the very foundation of society is in grave danger. On the face of it, Africa and Nigeria in particular should be in a good place as far as deterrence and prevention of grand corruption is concerned. But that's only on the face of it. The country has some of the most stringent laws against graft and malfeasance. Like many other countries on the continent, Nigeria signed up to the AU Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. It's a signatory to the UN Convention Against Corruption. Some of the organs of law enforcement have made significant arrests and succeeded in prosecuting a few high-profile culprits. But overall, corruption continues to grow in leaps and bounds, to the benefit of a few and the detriment of most. So, why is this tumor, this cancer, why does it keep growing instead of going into remission, despite all these measures? What can we do? What can be done to arrest such a scourge? I think this is where we need to pay attention. In my opinion, it has to be holistic. It has to be comprehensive. The approach cannot be one-sided. It should involve both ordinary citizens as well as political and social leaders. Everyone, all the citizens, each one of us in all walks of life, we must all commit to combating corruption. We must recognize that the powerful forces that benefit from corruption will fight back. The effort, therefore, cannot be half-hearted or allowed to be compromised by partisan, ethnic, or religious considerations. The fight has to be vigorously pursued from the top down and from the bottom up. Corruption should be attacked locally, and importantly, it requires a global front. Corruption is not a local event, but a global scourge, and it deserves an international antidote. I will like to conclude my brief remarks by stating 5 areas I think we need to strengthen if corruption is to be subdued and diminished significantly. First is the supremacy of the rule of law. The idea that the law is superior to any others in society and applicable to all citizens, no matter their status, must never be compromised. No one should be above the law. This should not just be a slogan, but a commitment. The teaching of subjects like civics that emphasize the responsibility of state to citizens and those of the citizen to the state, and the primacy of the constitution of the country and the rule of law should be included in primary and secondary school curriculum. It is important that people should grow up understanding the values and tenets that bind all society. They must understand and guard their individual rights and feel empowered as a citizen to exercise their rights and protect the rights of others from abuse. They must be made to learn about corruption from very early on. It must be a social shame to be labeled corrupt. Freedom of expression and the protection of whistleblowers will also help. It's important that all citizens feel protected to raise their voices when they encounter acts of corruption. This is so important if we are going to fight against corruption on a large scale. We will not stand a chance when people feel unable or unprotected from raising their voice when they are either victims or they know of others who have been victimized by corruption. No one should be a victim simply by blowing the whistle. We need new laws and commitment to fight those who do not allow whistleblowing to thrive. Transparency and accountability in public service is particularly important. Public service should not be an opaque enterprise. The reason they are called public servants is because they are to serve the interests of the public. They should not, therefore, be hiding important information from those they are supposed to serve. It is in the dark crannies of opacity that corruption thrives. Number 4, strengthening the institutions of governance. In recent years, EFCC and ICPC are two important organs of anti-corruption in Nigeria. They should and they need to be strengthened. They have done quite some work towards fighting corruption, but the odds seem to be stacked against them. Their independence must not be compromised. It's impossible to fight corruption with weak institutions. It takes a powerful to corrupt society. It cannot therefore be left to weak institutions to protect society against powerful forces. Nigeria has some of the most stringent anti-corruption laws and has signed up to international conventions to prevent and protect against the scourge. The institutions needed to fight this corruption scourge must be strengthened, and the conventions must be enforced. A weak institution and a lack of enforcement are basically the reasons why corruption has been able to thrive and to grow. It has rendered many of the national and international efforts against corruption ineffective. And now that brings me to the 5th and final suggestion. I wrote in an op-ed article for the Daily Maverick, for the South African Daily Maverick today, to mark the African Union Anti-Corruption Day. an article titled "A Global Scourge Deserves an International Antidote." Basically, what I'm saying is that 90% of the funds looted in Nigeria and in many African countries do not stay in Nigeria. Those who take bribes are as guilty as those who offer bribes. And in many instances, the bribe takers are not maybe Nigerians, but the bribe givers tend not to be. Therefore, because corruption is global and not local, it is important not only to fight it locally, but to fight it globally. I therefore called on the AU today to support the establishment of an international anti-corruption court. This is an initiative of the global organization called Integrity Initiatives International. When the IACC, the International Anti-Corruption Court, comes into existence, there will be no hiding places for those who loot Nigeria's funds. There will be no hiding places for the funds that they have looted. And when there is no hiding place, there is no incentive to loot. And so, to summarize, I think the African Union should lead the charge to establish an instrument that can bring culprits to book, no matter where they are based, no matter what country they belong to, whether they commit their offense in Nigeria and run to Switzerland or elsewhere, the long arm of the law should be able to reach them. I would want to hope that everyone would join hands, especially on this occasion of African Union's Anti-Corruption Day, to call for a renewed effort to attack this scourge. Most of what ails us, most of the reason why we fall short of our development goals, why youth unemployment is still so high, why poverty is still so rampant, why hospitals are not working, why insecurity is our bane, all of these things can be traced and placed squarely in the court of corruption. And so it is something where we have to join hands irrespective of our ethnic group. It doesn't matter what religion we belong to, and it would not count which political party we voted for. We must all commit to fighting this scourge. Otherwise, the next generation will blame us for not doing enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deji Hasrop. I think you've spoken very, very well and passionately about this subject. And the way we run this program is I will ask you a few questions. I think it's an engagement session so that we can really get your thought. And participants on the platform will also have questions and maybe some contributions to make. So we will be taking a lot of questions from the participants where we'll also ask our questions. And we really thank you for that very, very brilliant submission. But the question really is, how do we get, so you have suggested a lot of things, supremacy of the rule of law. When it is the lawbreakers themselves, the people that are supposed to uphold these laws, that are guilty of what we are trying to fix, how do we then get them to do what is right? Strengthen institutions, very good. They put their people there and do selective persecution of people they perceive. So how do the people, the ordinary people, how do we get involved? What do you suggest we should really do? Because if not, we'll just be on this mountain speaking the same English that we have been speaking. Those that are corrupt continue to be corrupt, and they get more corrupt.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I sense from your tone that you are as angry and concerned as I am about this whole situation. My recommendations are very simple. Well, you'll notice that the first one is commitment. Many people, I will tell, this is an anecdote, it's a true story. In 2014 or 2015, I think it was early 2015, a very close friend of mine walks into my office and says that he's not going to, he's a politician, he's a Nigerian politician, and says that he's not going to campaign for his party, and he belonged to the ruling party. And this was strange to me, and I said, so what's going to happen if you're not going to campaign for your party? Your party might lose this election if everyone decides to do what you're doing. He said, well, you know, they don't deserve it, and I've decided to go with the opposition. I said, well, good for you. I am one who is not particularly interested in partisan politics. Therefore, I tend to take a very aloof position when things like these are suggested. So I asked him, why is he concerned so much about his party, and what does he think about the opposition that he's going to join? He explained to me that he's not, in fact, optimistic that the opposition can unseat the incumbent party because the opposition is campaigning on anti-corruption, and Nigerians are not interested in that. This surprised me very much because politicians are supposed to be the closest to the people. They understand what to say to the people, and therefore, if a politician is telling me that most Nigerians care very little about corruption and all they want is food on the table, it tells me they do not understand the connection between corruption and the lack of food on the table. So essentially what we've got to do is to involve everyone in understanding how corruption affects them. The other thing about Nigeria is that everyone says corruption is bad until it affects someone who attends the same church or worships in their mosque or who comes from their village or their ethnic group. And all of a sudden, there come excuses. We've got to fight corruption wholeheartedly or not at all. We cannot let sentiments such as sectionalism or other considerations stop us from this fight. So my suggestion is that if we want to fight corruption, because Nigerians vote in elections, Nigerians want their people to be in charge of things. And I say, the best run countries, it doesn't matter who you know, because the institutions take care of everyone. But Nigerians always want someone they know to be either the minister or the commissioner. So we've got to get away from this and all work hard at improving those we elect to office and strengthening the institutions that fight corruption.
Okay, all right. Okay, So I guess my participants have a few questions, but the real issue is who will bail the cat. Is it elections that they will not allow people to? The elections are not free and fair to a very large extent, and the reasons why people vote, you have stated some of them, either they are from your church or from your village or from your part of the country. So it doesn't really matter what they are going to do. Are you saying in the next election we should insist that it is, because Buhari was saying he was going to fight corruption when he was contesting, and a lot of people believed him, and that was why they voted for him against Jonathan. And he came in. What happened to him? We really don't know. So the question really is, how do we start this whole process? Because if you wait for the government, they won't do it.
So
They can't do it.
Really, I think that,
Yes.
first of all, I always say to people that if you want to stop theft, you first must block the market for stolen goods. If you can't, it's going to be difficult to stop corruption if the incentives are there, if there is no deterrence. You will recall the case of a Nigerian governor who was taken to court with 150 counts on his head, and he pretty much was let go of. And then he traveled outside and made the mistake of stopping over in the UK, where he was arrested and charged with 2 of those same 150 counts that he couldn't be convicted of in Nigeria. He not only did not fight it, he pleaded guilty and he served jail time. Some of the funds that he was alleged to have looted was also returned. Why I'm saying this is, until and unless people have nowhere to hide, where you cannot, the incentive to loot is not there. If I can't buy homes in Dubai, I mean, some of the numbers that you hear, if you follow the EFCC cases, you will be shocked at how much money leaks out of the Nigerian system. But they don't stay here. They're taking outside. And if people feel that once I can get it out of Nigeria, then I'm home free, then there's no incentive to stop them. First of all, we have to strengthen our laws here so that they are jailed, they are held to account. But that's not happening right now. The laws are there, they're not being enforced. The institutions are there, they're not allowing them to operate. So we've got to rely on a top-down, bottom-up approach where if you escape the Nigerian jurisdiction, you're not going to escape the international long arm of the law.
Okay. All right.
That's how I think. Yes.
Okay, I have some participants with question. I think top-down is not going to work in Nigeria. So we are looking for a solution that will come from bottom up. If we are waiting for the people at the top, they will never do anything to themselves. But we have a few people that have questions on the platform, and it will be an engagement so that you can give your honest shot at some of the answers. Some of them you may not ask some of the questions. Some you may not know, or you may not have an answer. It doesn't matter. It's just a conversational platform where we all try to prefer solution. And to handle that segment of the Q&A, I will hand over to Jumoke Akintaylor, who is the second vice president of ALG. She has 1 or 2 questions of her own, and then she will handle the Q&A session. Jumoke, over to you.
Thank you, Uncle Oga. Thank you so much, Mr. Ashraf, for taking the time to do this. I'm going to yield the floor to the participants. We have about, I believe, 7 hands up. And my comment again is also because I see a lot of diasporans here, and you talked about tackling corruption being a global issue or has to be done from an international on an international level as well. And I'm so glad to see many of the diaspora leaders. Madam Okunubi, good to have you here. Maybe this is where we can start to advocate for policies that address corruption on the home front, where the international communities can close their doors to some of these looters that steal the country's resources and take it abroad. So I'm putting that because there are a lot of diaspora leaders here. And then the second thing I want us to look at is like we're pointing fingers at a certain sector, maybe the leaders, and we're not taking responsibility for our role as citizens. The NEPA guy that comes to cut off your light because you didn't pay, or maybe he's looking to bribe, or the bus driver that you have to bribe to get a seat, or whatever it is at every level of the society. So I want us to look at that. Every one of us has a role that we're playing in this corruption. And for us to address it, we have to hold ourselves accountable and then change our practices. So I'm going to call on, and the way we do this, Uncle Deji, is we usually take 3 questions at a time, and then you address them as a group, and then we take the next 3. I can also record the questions for you. That way we don't lose anything. So I'm going to call on Mrs. Adetula, and we are going to also ask everyone to please keep their comments very short and their questions to the direct, so that we can take as many people as we can. Go ahead, Mrs. Adetula, with your question. We've asked you to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Hastrop, I wish you saw my face when you mentioned the AU Convention on Mitigating Corruption, because I happen to be one of those who worked on that document when I was in the AU, and I was so active. I used my experience as a civil servant that was seconded to the AU. The Sierra Leonean head of delegation had to comment, asking why I was so active. And the chairman of the session said, yes, she's a Nigerian. She is helping us. Now, the point I'm making, Mr. Hastrop, how can we address assets from corrupt leader or individual whose assets were not recovered and died and left these assets to their family to be enjoying? This is a serious one. And unfortunately, we didn't put it, at least I can't remember putting it in that convention then. That is very, very important. How do we address the corruption at the airport? At every point, they want you to come and be contributing money before you can travel or when you come back. Let me leave it at that. I don't want to take over. Thank you very much, Mr. Hastrop.
Thank you very much, Ma. May I have Olu please ask a question?
Good evening, everyone. So mine is not a question. Mine is trying to identify what corruption is. I'll follow quickly upon what Madam Jumoke has stated. So I'll give you a few examples in trying to define corruption. I looked at the Bible just because I'm a Christian, and it has several references. Evil friendship corrupts good manners, a few of things. And then Paul was also talking to Timothy. So I think the first thing we should start to do is to define what corruption is. If I drive on one way, I'm corrupt. Okay, let's take it away from just bribery and all of that. If I refuse to hold government responsible for any wrong done, I'm corrupt. If I'm an investment broker, like the BGL 27 billion in the recession is a problem. If I'm a stockbroker and I'm manipulating the market, I'm corrupt. Corruption goes through every facet. Okay, if I sell something in the market, I'm not selling it the right price, I'm not using the right measurement, I'm corrupt. If I'm going to use the fact that I know somebody to be able to access something that I'm not entitled to, I'm corrupt. So we should first understand, without sets of values that regulate us as a nation or as individuals, we will never be able to tackle corruption. If you are going to collect money to vote and you are voting the wrong person because you have been given something, then you are corrupt. If you are going to celebrate Ibori and give him chieftaincy title coming back from jail, you are corrupt. If you are going to close your eyes to the fact that even major philanthropists in Nigeria have ruined our nation and we can't speak against them, then we are corrupt. So we need to identify the values that govern us as a nation, bottom up. Now we are throwing our traditional institutions on the altar of politicking. That's corruption on a large scale. Now, except to establish those values, no one individual can solve corruption until we are able to hold ourselves to account to say, this is what is required of me and I must do it. We shouldn't have estimated billing if all of us can have prepaid meters that will show exactly what you have consumed. We shouldn't bypass. Now, this is what I will say. One simple tool that may work, that the establishment will fight against, is technology. To a large extent, diffusion of technology will stem corruption, and it doesn't matter whether you are in the diaspora or you're in Nigeria. Many of our nations are corrupt. We are collaborators. We receive looted funds. We even interfere in elections, so that you have to bribe. You have to get a senior advocate who has goodwill with judges and all of that. So it stems through. And it has to be bottom up when we hold people to account and say, the market woman, you can't do this. You can't pour your refuse and drains. It's corruption. Bottom up, establishing sets of values. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I gave you additional time because I think it was important for you to give that background and context for the conversation. Thank you for those contributions. Go ahead, Auntie Yemisi. Good evening, Auntie. I've asked you to unmute.
Okay. Hello. Deji, thank you so much for coming here to speak with us. We've been looking forward to having this session with you. This is Miss Yemisi Ransom Kuti, in case you didn't recognize my voice. I first of all want to ask you for your commitment to the coalition we're trying to build to spearhead this change that we're all asking for. So we want your personal commitment this evening. Then from the presentation you made, you talked about supporting the institutions that our institutions are weak, EFCC, ICPC, blah, blah, NBA. Now, I know the EFCC seems to be making the right noises at the moment. How else do you think, as a group, as other institutions, how can we support EFCC, the Mr. Olukorede, I think is his name, to succeed? And finally, you're in the UK. How, and I think Jumoke touched on this in her comment earlier on, how can you mobilize Nigerians in the diaspora? Approach Abike Dabiri, the Diaspora Commission chairman, and create a movement from there, because you don't have the constraint of policemen arresting you willy-nilly, etc. How can you organize? It's easier to organize over there. How can you do that? Because that would create the momentum that I'm sure lots of Nigerians can get behind. If we see a group of you in front of the Nigerian embassy in New York, in California, if there's one there in Britain, it would add a fillip and some support and strength and courage to those of us who are fighting it here. So thank you very much. These are the questions I have for you. Once again, good to see you, and welcome to the program today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Very nice to hear your voice.
So do you want to respond to those three comments? The first one. Okay.
Right. I think I can remember. The first one has to do with the assets left to
by corrupt leaders. How
corrupt leaders to their
yes, so internationally. And there was a part two to that question. The part two to that question was, how do we address corruption at the airport coming and going as well? So that was Mrs. Adetula, and then Olu was general comments, and then Auntie's comments, the last one. So I have them written down if you want me to repeat them.
I think I have an idea, but
Okay.
I'm delighted to be able to talk to someone who was involved in drafting the AU convention. Unfortunately, these conventions haven't helped to suppress the appetite of corrupt individuals to perpetrate their corruption in most of Africa, and in particular in Nigeria. I think, again, the fact that there is no global international mechanism to compel the proceeds of corruption to be returned to the source, to the countries where they are looted from, irrespective of whether the looter died or, you know, we need such an instrument. And I'm particularly committed to work with the Integrity Initiatives International to see what can be done. Already, African leaders, some of them have already committed to this, but until it is put in place, it will be difficult to ensure. The whole thing of setting up an international court is not really to prosecute those who are involved in corruption. It is to deter them from corruption, because no one wants to have access to a lot of money that he's never going to be able to spend. And if you have an effective means of preventing them access to what they have looted, then they would give up on looting, and it would be a thing of the past. So I think this would probably be the game changer that we're looking towards. The question on the airport. The airport is just another public institution, like perhaps the police. The Afrobarometer survey included Nigeria, in which most Nigerians say that they have one of the most corrupt police. But I think that apart from the police, there are others too who abuse their power, their authority, who misused the authority they have for private benefit. And this takes me to the second question. It wasn't a question, it was a lot of comments. And what he's saying, which to a large extent I agree with, is that corruption is not something that you can simply point fingers. Until and unless society, the whole of society says no to corruption, corruption would find a place to thrive. And as I said in my presentation, people excuse corruption when it is someone they know. They excuse corruption if the person concerned is from their political party or is from their church or their mosque or their social club. Until and unless we understand that that's not the case. And that's why I suggested that the whole idea of anti-corruption has to start from a very early age. When we were young and we'd go to primary school, when we came back with our school bags and our mothers looked in the bag, if they found a pencil or a ruler or whatever that isn't ours, we'll be forced to take it back or to explain how we got it. And so you start to learn from a very early age that you are accountable for your behavior. And that has stopped. In Nigeria today, corruption has become almost normalized. And until and unless we go back to the roots of this, where people think that it's the big man in the office in Abuja that's corrupt. What I'm doing here is just a few pennies, and that's not corruption. It is corruption, even though grand corruption, which refers to the effort, the looting that's done in high office, even though that has more consequential outcomes than this everyday thing, but it starts from society. If society does not allow it, it doesn't grow, it doesn't thrive. It becomes shameful. These days, no one asks what anyone does to be able to afford the car they drive. What's important is that they're driving the best car, and everyone goes there. People attend parties in which people are spending money as if this thing is something that they pluck from a tree in their backyard. But they excuse that. They enjoy themselves. They don't want to talk about it. So it's got to be, as I said, it's bottom up and top down. It's got to involve the entire society. We've all got to commit ourselves to saying, no, we're no longer going to go this way because it hasn't done good for us. I mean, the economy of Nigeria is almost in a comatose. People are struggling, and there is no reason for it, because if over $2 billion, which is an estimate, is leaked every year, that can do quite a bit to shore up the economy. One thing that we must also talk about is that investments which grow economy run away from corrupt places. Very few Nigerians with money would invest in Nigeria, not to talk of foreigners. And yet, in order to grow our economy, because people are always talking about sharing the budget or sharing it, they're not talking about growing it. And our economy is not growing anywhere as fast as our population is growing. Therefore, we are almost perpetually in a recession in the real sense. Because if your population is growing at 5% and your economy is growing at 1%, your economy is not growing at all. So in this case, we've got to understand that we need to grow the economy. We need to put a lot of money into infrastructure, health, education, and most of all, in strengthening our weak institutions of governance. That's how to get where we want to go. So as far as committing myself to being a member of the Coalition for Change, of course I am. I've always been committed to that, and I will always be. You have my personal commitment. As for EFCC and the others, again, it goes back to the risk of repeating myself. You see, the problem is not just EFCC. We've got to fight for it to be truly independent. There's no reason why it is so easy to sack the head of EFCC. The appointment of EFCC should not be done by one person or a few people. It should be something that the society should be encouraged to partake of. And no EFCC director should feel that they can be sacked if they step on certain toes, which is really sometimes the case. So the society must get involved in ensuring that those institutions that represent society and act as a bulwark against malfeasance and graft should be supported by all. I think that's the last one.
Yeah, she also mentioned something about mobilizing Nigerians in the diaspora across the board, maybe to whether it's to protest or try to influence these policies in their host countries or their home countries against corruption. So that was the second part of the comment.
Yeah, certainly. I hope that very soon we will see the International Anti-Corruption Court Treaty in place. And I will expect that Nigerians in diaspora will support it and will give it their full support so that it becomes a reality. I would certainly like to see that and partake of it.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll take the next 3 sets of questions. We have 6 hands up. We will take Madam Lara Okunubi, and then Charles Obin, and then we'll take Mr. Ademola in as the Professor Okome. The first 3, those are the next 3 we'll take. So please go ahead, Madam Lara, with your question. We've asked you to unmute.
Thank you so much, Lady J. And thank you for the speaker. Very, very serious diagnostics of the problem. But if we're truly going to be the change agents, we need to define an action plan today. Otherwise, there's no point to look in the mirror and see how good or ugly you look and then walk away. We have to have an action plan. And I'm speaking as a diasporan. One of the issues, Mrs. Ransom Kuti almost stole my thunder, because those are the things I wanted to talk about. For diaspora right now, we are compromised. When you get to the airport, you have issues at the airport. You have no choice as at now, because there's no consequence to people who are violating your right. You have no option but to give them what they're asking for in order to go by. Otherwise, you will be there for 4 hours. So Tinubu said he has 4D policy: diaspora, democracy, demography, and development. We need to hold Tinubu's feet to the fire right now. This is a big platform. You are Good Governance Africa. We need to make presentation to Tinubu about what are the ways that diaspora will not be part of this madness. Because all of the people in diaspora, we're in the countries where compliance is enforced. So we cannot come back and be part of the rat race in Nigeria. We cannot be part of the problems. We need to be part of the pollution. You spoke about a policeman who takes bribe. The police people, they are underfunded. This guy has a family to feed. So if the option to do the right thing is not there, if the consequences are not laid out, we're just kidding ourselves. So my recommendation is this conversation needs to go a step further. We need to write a letter to Tinubu asking that the diaspora must have access to come into the country, even though they said those things are there, but they're not enforced. So that we're not part of the people coming through the door, bribing the, what are they called? Immigration officer. Yeah, custom officer, immigration officer. After you've cleared everything, there's nothing in your bag. You have 10 people standing and say, open. What do you bring for me? I mean, all those stupid things. If we are going to end corruption, it's not going to be at once, because it was not built at once. But we have to start from critical places where we can see the effect of it. And I know that the outcome that we're all looking for is to have a civil community. But everybody, like Lady Jumoke said, we're all change agents, especially those of us in diaspora. We must be held accountable. But in order for us to be accountable, there needs to be the option, the path to do the right thing. Otherwise, everybody's continuing to do the bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Charles, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you, QJ. I thought maybe there's no need to say anything anymore, because Madame Lara has said quite a bit of what I was going to say. However, I still have a few things to say. We hear a lot about the return of the Abacha loot, to the country. Question is, what became of that, of the money that was returned to us? There has not been any transparency. Nobody has told us how the money has been spent, what it was used for, and who spent it. Number one, in some of your statistics you quoted, you talked about 49 out of 54 African countries are failing the corruption index, or beyond 50%. And in particular, Nigeria is somewhere around 32%. I think when you look at those numbers right there, it tells you that it's a bigger war than we are actually aware of. I think each one of us has to look in the mirror and say to ourselves, how am I contributing to this? Because this is something that has been there. We do it all the time. You don't even need to go to the airport in Nigeria to to experience this issue. Go to the embassies, go to and try to get your passport. I mean, it's going to stare you right in the face. How are we participating? How are we contributing to this evil that is eating our country up? Until we start to, each individually, until we start to answer these questions and say, I don't want to be part of it, or until there are consequences to the giver, there are consequences to the giver and consequences to the taker. We need to stop, as a people, we need to stop saying we need a Jerry Rawlings in Nigeria. If we needed one, God would give us one. We don't need a Jerry Rawlings. We have all the Jerry Rawlings we need in that country, but we have to have the courage to start to say, let us start from where we are and start to implement some critical changes that we take. We can't talk about it. It's not an election campaign. We need change. But when it doesn't come, we fall back in line with the people who are robbing us blind. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I also just want to announce that the hands we have now are going to be the last hands that we're going to take, just because we want to have an opportunity to have closing comments. Please go ahead, Professor Okume. Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. And thank you very much for this presentation. I think that there are aspects of corruption that are structural, and that the relationship between corruption and poverty is not just one way. That also there are conditions of deep poverty that encourage corruption, because there's scarcity and people want access to those things, and then would do anything to get that access, including giving inducements to people whose job it is to provide those resources in the first place, or services. But that being said, I also think some of our problem, I mean, I liked your 5-point takeaway at the end, because it tells us what we need to do. But like with all those kind of suggestions, they take work. So people, especially people who are frustrated with very terrible conditions on the ground, think that that could not be everything that is needed. Those are the things that are needed, but they can't give us magical solutions, because it takes commitment by everybody to say, okay, I am not going to pay the bribe. And I've been in such situations, you know, with the passport, whether it's local here in Nigeria or in the embassies, with coming into the country and people treating you as if you are some cash cow, you know, I refuse. So whatever it is, that's the consequence of not paying, I'm ready to bear it. And sometimes the airport, going from Nigeria to the US, I will send things back home. If you say that I should pay a bribe to take whatever it is, I'll say, okay, people are with me, they can take it back home. And that, you know, so sometimes the people will say, okay, fine, you shouldn't go. Sometimes because they see that you are not paying, they let you go. So we also have to be part of this. But you know, if we're saying that whistleblowing is important, how do we protect the whistleblowers? You said that we need to protect whistleblowers. And it's not just the government that should protect them. It's us ordinary people too. That when somebody is trying to do the right thing, who has their back? Then, you know, I think also with us in Nigeria and in many African countries, I like the fact that you tell us that corruption is not just an Africa problem, because I live in the US and it's pretty corrupt. I mean, there is corruption, except if you want to be blind to what's going on in front of your face. There's corruption everywhere. But I'm concerned about Nigeria because there are developmental stages that we need to go through as a nation that we haven't gone through. And we're suffering massively, at least if we're looking at the masses. So if we want to correct all these things, it's actually not rocket science. Are we implementing even the weak laws that we have? We're not good at implementation. We're good at churning out words and laws and regulations, and then we don't enforce. And when I look at the agencies you mentioned, they don't do a good job of really going after everybody that should be prosecuted. They're used in very selective ways to go after the enemies of whoever is in power. And then sometimes also the people in power themselves are they're not good role models when it comes to saying that we are anti-corruption. So structurally, we have a problem. But then every one of us must contribute to ensure that if we say there are laws, then part of the problem. And I don't think that the people in diaspora are more holy than the people at home, frankly. I think this assumption that diaspora is better and whatever, we should get over it.
Yes.
Because a lot of us are produced by the same social system, and then we submit to the same incentives. So let's be a little bit more humble about what we are, but we can commit to doing better, because what is at stake is the development of our country and future generations, survival. So thank you very much anyway.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Ashraf, those were mostly comments. I don't know if you want to respond to them. I don't know that there was questions per se. If you want to respond to those comments, otherwise we can take the next set of 3.
I just wanted to say that the last speaker spoke my heart. We all have to take responsibility. There is no absolutely clean space. I said it. Corruption is a global problem, and that's why it has to be attacked globally. There's no country that is free or safe from corruption. If you don't give bribes, there will be no one who takes bribes. And it's not always that Nigerians are the ones who give bribes to Nigerians, especially at the higher levels. The other thing she mentioned is individuals and our own responsibilities. I must say, though, that we need to strengthen the institutions so that things don't work because of a big man, but things work because of a strong institution. Because if things only work when there's a big man or strong man in charge, once he leaves the position, then we go back to status quo. We have to make working the examples of a few places that work. I would tell you, in my experience, I got my passport from the Nigerian High Commission in Johannesburg in 24 hours. It's never happened to me. And they were very polite. They were very, it's a totally different set of system in place now. I mean, and this is not my first time of getting my passport from that same office. So it can be done. It just takes every individual to commit to doing the right thing. Most people come and they're not willing to. If somebody is on a queue and refuses to take bribe, you find the people behind him on the queue asking him to get out of the way because they are willing to pay and he's not. And so this is the situation we find ourselves in. I really do mean it when I say that we need to reorient ourselves. The tenets and values of a thriving society, we almost seem to have lost it all. We need to start afresh again.
Thank you,
I'll
sir.
stop there and take the next 3.
Okay, so we'll have, I believe, Mr. Lekon. Please go ahead with your question, and then Mr. Ademola Ogun. We'll have you next. Please go ahead, Mr. Lekon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hastrop, for that very comprehensive analysis of the problem and also insights of possible solutions that can be taken in parallel. You did mention the role of the individual and the society collectively, both internal and external. For example, you mentioned the role of EFCC to OAU. My question to you is, how do we begin to address this issue of corruption in Nigeria, given the fact that the very same system that we are talking about throw up the worst of us, and we know absolute power corrupt absolutely. An example of this is, we know the election or the selection of the head of the EFCC is based on who we know. And obviously, there's going to be that partial disposition of justice. So my question is, how can we begin to sanitize our political system that will at least give us a chance that nationalists with good agendas and that are nationalistic in view get up there to develop policies that will enhance all of us? So thank you, Mr. Hastroff, for that, for your insights. I'll wait to get your response.
Thank you very much. And may I have Mr. Ademola Ogun? Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Mr. Ogun, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, we'll move to, I believe, Tokes. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thanks everyone. Actually, mine is not a question really, it's a sort of comment, so I just want to add to what Deji said. I mean, I think I listened to his presentation, very insightful, but I mean, based on what everyone has said, basically what you have here is a systematic failure, which they also mentioned so many times. That's institutional failures. Now, what two institutions which I think was never mentioned is the media. And I'm surprised because Deji is also from the media world. Maybe he's protecting his. I'm just a joke. I mean, but I mean that is field anyway. I think the media has a strong role to play, whether we like it or not. I mean, I see. I think our media want it by body as apologies to those who might not understand my Yoruba, but honestly, they are not doing enough. Without a strong media, honestly, absolutely agree all the institutions have to be on board. But I think the media has a stronger role to play because they have the voice, they have the platform. We never, when we are growing up, never actually appreciated the role of the media. But as we grew up and as we live in other parts of the world, we now see how powerful the media is. So my contribution is the media has a strong role to play. Now, the other thing Deji said, which was very pertinent, was that one way to discourage corruption is not to create a market for stolen goods. I like that analogy, very powerful. Now, and he used example of a governor. But you know what? Let's name names here. I'm not shying away from names. It was Ibori he was talking about. I mean, I like shooting straight. I don't like, it was Ibori. Now, let's walk back a little bit. Ibori was able to get away with accomplices within this financial institution. So, and that is my other comment. The financial institution have a strong role to play. I remember one time someone sent a large sum of money to me from somewhere. That was about 10, 15 years ago. And my bank called me, okay? Because they said, oh, where did I get that money from? I'm not sure whether, I know there are laws in Nigeria, okay, that also money laundering laws all over the place, but I'm saying those laws, those financial institutions, our financial institutions are accomplices, pure and simple, because those money couldn't have gotten out of Nigeria without the input or without the support or the assistance of our financial institutions. So our financial institutions have to step up. The central bank must actually impose severe penalty for money laundering. There are too many money laundering going on there. Okay, so those are my 2 comments. The media has to step up. Our financial institutions also have to step up. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. So I see Mr. Ademola Ogun, you've unmuted yourself. Please go ahead with your question.
I'm a realist, and what's happening in my great country is systemic in nature. The rule of law is a joke with regards to when you look at what has happened with Russia and the oligarchs. It's so amazing that they were able to obtain information in terms of where these oligarchs have been placing their money. Why has it not been the situation with those who have looted the national treasury and put it in Europe? It's just a question that they don't give a damn. Excuse my English. Thirdly, with regards to the diaspora, unfortunately, if you don't have the voting rights, politicians aren't going to keep you in mind with regards to your protests. That's a fact. I know some of these folks and what they've expressed. And the National Assembly has done its own part, not recognizing the voting rights of those who live outside the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to address those 3 comments? I think
yes, they're very, yes, I mean, if I forget any, I'm sure you're going to remind me.
Yes, I will.
Okay, so I think Lekon was spot on. One of the things that I keep repeating is that all of us, all hands have to be on deck. We abuse bribe takers, money launderers. We say all kinds of things about them, but only when they are not our relation, only when they don't belong to our ethnic group, only when they're not from our church or mosque. So all of us have to be part of the process. But the most important thing that I have noticed is there is more tolerance for graft now than it was several years ago when we were growing up. The society has become more tolerant of people making money any way they can. And this is why I suggest as one of my 5 pillars to go back to basics and let the next generation understand that it's up to them to get the children prepared for a future that's better than the present. And that's one way to address that. Talks talked about the media. I didn't want to go into detail, but I've always believed that in society, in any society, especially in our society, the media, the people of the pulpit, and that I mean people like Pastor Itwa, teachers in secondary, primary, and tertiary institutions have a lot of influence on society than others. But most of these have failed us. The journalists have become very partisan, but that's not only in Nigeria, it's the world over. They've abandoned their role to look out for the interest of the public. They now look after sectional interests. So you have what they call liberal media, conservative media, all kinds of private interests. And when these so-called fourth realm of the estate abandons its role to look out for the public interest, the other three arms feel free to do what they choose. And so we have a situation in Nigeria that the rescuer needs to be rescued. And so the only thing I can say is the school teacher who hardly tells. Many of us remember some of our teachers because they showed us the way. Next to our parents, we were mindful of them and of what they require of us. We're always, even in adulthood, you still defer to your teachers when you see them because you remember the authority with which they helped mold your character. That we have lost. So I think the media, the people on the pulpits, the teachers, all of them should match up. It's only the politicians that are in charge now, and we've allowed them to be the quote-unquote leaders of society. But that need not be the case. And the politicians find themselves in a situation where they can use that authority and that position of influence for private gain. We have to reverse that. I wanted to talk about the issue of diaspora and voting. I think this is such a terrible shame. Most countries allow every citizen to vote, irrespective of where they are. I've had arguments about people in the diaspora don't really know what's going on. They don't care what's going on. They can't vote for what they don't know about and all sorts of things. But I think that's no excuse. And I think that this whole idea that people outside Nigeria who are Nigerians should be allowed to vote should not be given up on. I think that it's a right, and people who are Nigerians who contribute to, I know a lot of people in the diaspora contribute to the economic sustenance of Nigeria. In fact, without the remittances of the diaspora, I doubt that many can go on as they have in these very difficult times. So I don't support the idea not to grant voting rights simply because we don't live in the country. And I think that we should still press ahead and ask for that right. That's the third one.
Yeah, I believe Mr. Tokes also mentioned the role of the financial institution in stemming corruption, and that they've been a culprit in corruption as well. So
yeah, you see, I mentioned that during my statement. Nigeria has some of the most stringent laws. The same laws that bind Citibank, that binds Bank of America, is in existence in Nigeria. The whole problem is whether or not people follow these laws, and if they don't, is there anyone to enforce it? You know, so enforcement is a major issue in Nigeria. It's not a question of whether the laws are there or not. If we're really serious about tackling this problem of corruption, we've got not only to have the internal laws, we've got to have the external laws, because on those laws will ensure, the first thing is, let's stop corruption and looting. But if we are not able to stop that, let's ensure that they're not able to take the loot out of Nigeria, and Nigeria benefits from what rightfully belongs to it.
thank you very much. We'll take the last 3 sets of questions, and then would also ask you to prepare for your closing remarks. And in your closing remarks would be recommendations and action point. And to Madam Okunubi's point was what is the action some of us in the diaspora can take. And I also want to just add something to the questions. We talk about diaspora voting rights, and I submit that Maybe if we start influencing policies that hold leaders accountable from where we are, we don't have to ask for diaspora voting. Then they would understand the power and the influence the Nigerians in the diaspora have, and then it would be something that would be automatic. So I just want to appeal as a diaspora myself to diasporans that we really need to start influencing foreign policies that can hold our leaders accountable from our host countries. Would have Mr. Adebayo additional, please ask your question, and then Dr. Sheyi, and then the very last will be Dr. Bukbola. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Vice Adesina. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. With due respect, I want to, you will agree with me that the people gathered on this platform are made up of the elite, and the society compass many other segments, and we have people that we relate with on a daily basis in our businesses and in our movement that are they don't know what we are discussing here, and they have another set of values. And I'm saying that, though I believe that the speaker, I think, mentioned this at some point, but I'm just big on the fact that the issue of this weaponization of poverty and scarcity is really contributing. Someone also mentioned that it's not only Nigeria that there is corruption, that she stays in the US and there's corruption. I want to think that there will be a scale that people over there, with all the social infrastructures and the options of economic advancement that are open to them, who are still corrupt, we could say that that is their choice. But here, the way things have panned out since from the 80s, we can see that the society itself needs a total overhauling. I'm talking about family values now and societal values. Family values, where some parents now are expecting the children to bring in the process of corruption and things like that to sustain themselves. You know, apologies. There's a woman that was saying, that was discussing with her friend the other day. I was saying that our daughter's boyfriend or fiancé, as the case may be, that he has a good job. You know, she was telling her friend that, you know, the boy has a good job. He's a Yahoo boy. You know, so I mean, I heard that and I was like, wow. That woman needs a total 360 degrees change in her thinking and her mindset. Societal values. We are talking about immigration officers and that take bribes from the people passing by through the airport and things like that, or even at the passport offices and so on and so forth. But what about the downfall drivers on the road? If you see them drive and you see the way they relate with their conductors, you will wonder what kind of people or operators they are going to be and how that can be expunged from our everyday lives. Because they believe that wrong is right. They do things and the way they go about it and what they believe is that doing those bad things, and you cringe. Yeah. You cringe when you see such things happen, and you know that these things are embedded, and we need a change of heart, because the heart make men is what is in the heart that gives rise to attitudes and behaviors. So when you leave the airport, for instance, you are going to relate with this.
Please go ahead, sir, and wrap up so that we can take the others, if you don't mind. Thank you.
All right, that's okay. I think my point, the only other one I want to say is that I'm suggesting that we can have integrity clubs in the primary and secondary schools where these things can start, you know, we can start from the base. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have Dr. Sheyi Awojobi? Please go ahead.
So, thank you very much, the moderator and the speaker. We've had a lot from the comments and the questions, but my question is to seek clarification on what exactly is the role of developed countries who pose as friends of Nigeria, and they have a double standard approach. We've heard even from the speaker and people who ask questions here to say corruption is a global issue. But what is the role that these developed countries, are colonial masters and friends or business partners of Nigeria, are playing in such a way that our leaders will loot the country, they will take this money out of the country to another country, e.g. Switzerland, and the government of such countries will clone them. How can we even address the issue of corruption from this part of the developed country roles? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we'll take the last question, Dr. Popola. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, please, and all the elite and excellent people on this platform. The Nigerians we want, the Nigeria we hope will take up the mantle of our country. Number one, let me first put it this. What is stopping the implementation of the state and local government area police? I believe when this comes in play, at least we'll have a stepwise reduction of corruption. Number two, what would make the new local government promulgation work? I believe with that there will be some accountability. It will be disparate, that it's not going to be the same across the board, but these are the two building blocks that can change the direction that we are going, in which people who are supposed to be held to their responsibility will be visible right in front of people they are exploiting or where they are not declaring their duty. This too is so important. And as it's mentioned, nobody takes the discussion further. This should have been from elementary school to high school, university level, not just to the two houses of parliament. So these are my two questions. What is stopping it and what will enable the other one work? Now, the comment is, I agree the basis of our corruption is the endemic divisiveness in the country. We are getting more and more divided on things that will not contribute to the success for anybody, any region. Completely negative attitude. And we are passing it back and forcing it down the throat of our children, which is very unfortunate. So I'm in line with everybody that has said that we should go back to the high school level and inculcate citizenship and core values of civilization or civility in them. I'm Popola, I'm the president of Nigeria, NIDO in New Jersey. And I also know that the diaspora bill has again passed the second reading. I think it goes through 4 readings. It has passed to the second or third reading at least 4 times in the past. And something keeps on holding it back. I wish that we can know what is the next thing, who should we lobby with to enable this happen. We've been always sitting at the back and want things to happen. We should all be proactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So go ahead, sir, with if you can respond to all those. I think they were mostly comments, and then your closing remark along with the recommendation on action items. Thank you so very much, everyone. Go ahead, sir. Over to you, Uncle Deji.
Well, thank you. It was mostly a lot of comments and very, very few questions indeed.
I'm going to add one question. Sorry. There's one question from the chat. If I can add one question from the chat, which is from Pastor Tayo Fagbero, and his question is, how can you talk about, can you address corruption from government procurement system, as the government is the largest spender in the economy? That's the question. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I mean, yes, I think that he's quite right. Government, the corruption in government stems principally from 2 to 3 different government activities. One is procurement through over-invoicing, and another is in contract and through kickbacks. And the third, which is similar to that, is bribery to get contracts. All of these are the means through which corruption in government thrives. If someone needs, let's say, a million naira to complete a school building, and the ministry or the permanent secretary or whoever in government says that he first has to deposit 200,000 naira into his account before he can approve the contract. Now, 200, maybe he was hoping to make 100,000 profit. Now, not only has he lost his profit, he has lost part of his working capital. Now, how is he going to do a good job? How is he going to provide for the people a product that is worth a million when a tenth or more of that fund has already gone into other people's pocket? Now, if he's unable to deliver, the man in government is not going to hold him accountable, because he realizes that if he holds him accountable, he would mention the fact that some of the money went where it's not supposed to go. So year in, year out, we find ourselves with issues of abandoned projects not well completed, or substandard construction and the like. So this is part and parcel of what happened in government. So procurement is just a part of that. And the reason why corruption thrives in procurement is because you can over-invoice. But over the years, I think particularly starting during the last administration, there are new technology has been introduced. But I can assure you, if you don't hold people accountable, they will bypass the technology, they will bypass the laws, and they will do exactly what they want to do. So the problem comes back to the same: enforcement. How do you enforce the laws? How do you ensure that the regulations are followed? Until we get our acts around this, how do you ensure that whistleblowers are protected? Because there's no way that some of these things can happen in government that it would not be known to others. And so this is why I go back to my recommendations when I was making my presentation, that we should make, I'm just rounding it up now. We should make the issue of the supremacy of the rule of law paramount. Every Nigerian should understand that society can only thrive if all of us are subject to the same laws. It doesn't matter where we come from or how much money we have in our bank account. The law of Nigeria is the supreme code under which every one of us will be held accountable. And this idea has to be inculcated into the young right from an early age. And those of us who are no longer young must make a personal and private commitment to this. Otherwise, things will not change. The supremacy of the rule of law is a foundation on which any society can hope to develop and grow. So that is my first recommendation. The second one, which is the freedom of expression and the protection of the whistleblower mentioned before, there are still a very few good reporters and journalists. They must be allowed to do their work professionally. To have access to government information shouldn't, be something that the reporter has to jump through hoops to be able to access. And the whistleblower also has to be protected. The idea of transparency and accountability is paramount. There's nothing about government that ought to be in the dark because they represent the people. The people must have the right to understand how government operates. I think a lot of this is being improved upon. The latest one being the new local government law. So despite the fact that things are dismal, there are incremental steps towards doing the right thing. What we've got to do is to support these steps and to not be one of those who just complain and end up being a part of the problem and not the solution. Somebody said during the conversations that, and I think it was the second speaker who said that a lot of us do all the wrong things and then we point at the people in government. Each of us has to make a personal commitment not to. And sometimes when you stand your ground, when you refuse to give bribe, eventually you get your way, but you feel happy that you are able to stick to your personal code of conduct and values. I think that we should strengthen that. The fourth and a very important one is strengthening institutions. We have laws. I keep saying it, some of Nigeria's laws are some of the best. They can compare with laws outside Nigeria. The difference is that there's no compliance to the laws and there's no enforcement. No one holds anyone accountable, and therefore there's no incentive to actually implement these laws and get the benefits from them. So we've got to work hard at that. And this is where everyone comes in, the civil society organizations, the media, the pastors, the imams, people who have influence must use their, what they call their bully pulpit, or whatever you want to call it, to espouse these values repeatedly. The society is a product of the decline in the people's values. And in order to resuscitate this, we'll look to the media, we'll look to the pastors, we'll look to the teachers, and not so much to the politicians. And the final one, which I think is the game changer, is the International Anti-Corruption Court. If this court becomes a reality and people know that whatever they accumulate through malfeasance, through graft, they cannot spend. They don't have access to it. Their children don't have access to it. Then there's no point in stealing at all. Because if you're not able to spend the money you steal, why bother? So I think that as we strengthen the internal mechanisms, we've also got to support all those outside and within Nigeria. I understand that the current, I was reading the press statement that was put out this morning to mark the AU Anti-Corruption Day. And I noticed that the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Nigeria has already indicated the country's support. In a statement, he said, Nigeria as a country is deeply affected by corruption, and it could benefit significantly from the establishment of an international anti-corruption court. Such a court could address cases involving individuals and assets located abroad, often tied to grand corruption schemes that have a devastating impact on Nigeria's development efforts. That's the statement of Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Minister of Justice, and Attorney General of Nigeria. So obviously, this is also realized by people in government, that this thing cannot be, it's a global issue and it cannot be addressed locally alone. While we strengthen national institutions, we have to rely on the collaboration of foreign governments and these international treaties to stem this. As I said before, there's no market for stolen goods. There will be no thieves. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very, very much. And before I bring up Mr. President for his closing remarks and his vote of thanks, I just wanted to also announce that here at Africa Leadership Group, we have a School of Leadership and Good Governance where we teach citizens responsibility course. And there is a link in the chat. Please go ahead and fill that, and you can be more engaged in those courses. And we also have a youth engagement where we also helping them understand the need for responsible, ethical, and accountable leadership. We also have the Itwa Olajide Godalo mentorship program. Uncle Deji, I believe you are a mentor there. So these are some of the things that we're doing at Africa Leadership Group to change this mindset. And Mr. President would always say, who will bail the cat? So we now understand the cost of corruption, and we've all talked about our role in the cost of corruption. So please get involved in Africa Leadership Group. We collaborate with other organizations, and I'm sure we would have the opportunity to collaborate with Mr. Ashraf and what he's doing across the African continent. Thank you, everyone. And we meet here every Thursday, same time, 5 p.m., same Zoom link. So if you don't get the flyer, save this Zoom link on your calendar. 5 p.m. We'll be here except over the holidays. Thank you so much for joining us. We're glad you were able to join us today. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming on the platform today. We're truly, truly grateful. Thank you, my brother, for those very robust, candid, and insightful points that you gave as to our situation in our country. We are praying to God and we're believing God, and we're thinking and hoping that our small efforts like this will need some kind of fruit and some kind of response. We'll be calling upon you again to share some other insights and see how we can take Nigeria forward. Let me thank everyone who's been on the platform. Thank all those who asked questions and made comments. We really, really thank you for everything. We're grateful to God. Once again, I'd like to thank the back office, Faye, Oluvictor. Oluvictor is burying his mom in another few weeks. Please remember him in your prayers. I want to thank him very much for the enormous amount of work that he's been doing and is doing. Pastor Sonny, thank you very much. Pastor Tayo, thank you so much. Jumoke, thank you as always. God bless you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the evening and a brilliant weekend ahead. God bless you. Bye.
Bye. Good night, everyone, and bye. Many thanks to the lecturer. Bye. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Good night. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Jumoke.
Thank you, Auntie. We'll follow up with this coalition we've been talking about. We'll have
exactly. I keep recruiting